The first set of extreme trial weapons we received in Dawntrail are the Skyruin weapons from Valigarmanda. I really love the designs of these weapons, and coming from such a memorable fight, I decided to make glamour sets for every role to match these weapons. These are some of my favorite weapon-based glamours that I've ever created, and I hope you enjoy this presentation for them. Starting off with the tanks, I immediately knew what body piece I wanted to pair with these weapons. The level 75 Dungeon Ravelkeeper set from Shadowbringers were some of my favorite armor designs to glam with, so I was really pleased to see them reused as leveling gear in Dawntrail. Each of these gear sets includes feathers, leathers, and decorative metal accents which perfectly match the visual themes of the weapons. With the double dye channels, I could pick a green for the leather and a gold for the accents that matches perfectly. With the glove and head slots, I looked for ways to incorporate red colors that matched the straps wrapped around the weapons, and various shades of bright orange to fit the feathers. For the legs, I wanted something more heavily armored and fending themed, so I picked plated boots that, while they only have a single dye slot, do come with gold details already in the correct color. Looking closely at the weapons, there's so many fantastic little details that really show the artistic effort that went into making full use of Dawntrail's increased visual fidelity and texture qualities. The edges of the blades have rough and jagged appearances like they're hewn from stone. They're attached to poles and handles that have a more organic appearance, such as bones or horns, and are covered in scales. These scales are noticeably keeled, which refers to that ridge down the center of the scale, and is commonly seen in reptiles and lizards, which connects with Valigarmanda's design. The gold accents that adorn the weapons are covered in patterns that resemble historical South American motifs. One of my favorite decorative elements on these weapons are the clusters of beads and feathers. These are actually articulated and swing in response to the wind and motion. While I would have preferred for these to have a greater range of motion, it's a nice touch, and the attention to detail makes the weapons feel dynamic and realistic. For Paladin, I love the weighty one-sided design of the sword, which could be used just as easily for bludgeoning as it is for cutting. The shield is simply stunning, with beautiful symmetry in the feathers and wing motifs, and my favorite detail is the tassels being connected to those red ribbons via gold rings. Noticing these from an angle really gives the shield some visual depth and dimensionality, as you can imagine them clanking against it while moving. For Warrior, I love the bone-like curving handle of the axe and how it almost seems like it's bending under its own weight. You can even see a portion of the handle that is not covered by scales here. The most striking feature is the almost jarringly split anchor points for the blade, which to me implies how these weapons are fashioned from various materials being opportunistically combined, rather than being built to a planned design. For Dark Knight, the curving blade and open design can't help but make me think of the iconic Klingon Batleth, but in reverse. And I really like the use of this claw attached through the handle to create a pommel crossguard. For Gunbreaker, I love the way the braided straps have been used to reinforce the attachment of the blade to the thin gold backing behind it. Small grooves are cut out of the blade to protect the straps from being cut, and it really helps the blade stand out on its own in that typical gunblade fashion without feeling like it's going to fall off. The vine-like wooden elements in the guard are even shaped and positioned to imply the idea of a trigger and breech release. Moving on to the casters, I again wanted to use one of my favorite body pieces from the Ravel sets. The double dye channels here let me emphasize orange to match the feathers and a green to match the scales. There's even a natural sheen included in the fabric material that enhances this effect. I love the massive feathers hanging from the skirt, and my only regret with this top is that the red color also affects the metal jewelry, which would have looked a lot better in gold. So I decided to make up for this by focusing on gold accents in the glove and head slots. Initially, I wasn't fully sold on the Pantheon arms from Aglaya, as the gold is not quite the correct color for the weapons, but I really liked the mix of metal and leather straps on them, and it happened to match the Ronkin headpiece that I really wanted to use for its similar shapes, glyphs, and tassels. For Black Mage, I love how the focusing sphere in the center of the staff is secured by red straps. Black Mage staffs often have orbs and crystals suspended in the air at the end of the rod, and this just makes me think that the sphere here isn't even attached to the gold cup that it's resting on, hence the straps being used. The top of the staff resembles the architectural motifs used in the Tulialal Palace, and a cute bit of trivia is that this is the same staff design wielded by Zorilja, who previously worked as a seer at that palace. For Summoner, This book and Scholars are the ones that most made me wish that the tassels on these weapons were more dynamically animated. The tassels on the books do swing slightly, but in my opinion they would look so much better hanging down at an angle away from the book when it's open, rather than remaining alongside the edge of the pages. Although the hand covers it when open, you can see that the spine of the book actually resembles the spine of Valigarmanda from head to tail, and thus the wings on the covers of the book truly resemble the body of the Fedral when fully opened. For Red Mage, I love the efficient taper of the rapier from that chunky hilt down to a narrow tip. The tassels here have a wider range of motion and can change which way they are hanging based on the orientation of the weapon. The floating focus has the appearance of animal horns, and it's overall much larger than most others, making it really stand out on this weapon. For Pictomancer, the brush tip is the most striking aspect of this weapon for me. Although clearly these are feathers in various shades and patterns, from a distance I can't help but feel this reminds me of a flower bud waiting to blossom open. The feathers appear like leaves and petals, which gives the brush a similar vibe to that PvP rose brush. The gold accents here look crimped on like a cable tie, holding the bristles to the shaft. I'm not sure how this palette is supposed to provide paint for this, but the glossy material type used here gives this a noticeable marble-like reflectivity when the light moves across it, which is cool. Moving on to the healers, I wanted to step away from using the Ravel designs, so I started experimenting with other outfits. The level 93 dungeon Worker Zormer gives us access to this outfit, which we see much of the Turali peoples wearing. These colorful robes were a perfect match for the aesthetic of the weapons, and it got the added bonus of the headgear being one of the few full headpieces wearable by Vieira as well. Dyed with the appropriate reds and greens, it really makes those gold accents stand out. The browns and golds of the Pantheon gloves and boots fit right in with the colors here, to give a mixed cloth and plate look inspired by the materials of the weapons themselves. My only disappointment with this set is that the chunkier parts of the gloves and boots actually clip through parts of the robe, but the outfit is already busy enough that it doesn't really stand out. And I love the design so much that I was willing to overlook it. Creating this glamour gave me a big appreciation for how good these Zormer outfits are, and I'm glad that I decided to collect all of them while I was leveling. For White Mage, I really like the symmetry of the design and the way the major angles are curved downwards in opposition to the Black Mage's rod design. There's a good degree of motion to the tassels hanging beneath, and the teal of these ribbons even matches fairly well with the embroidery on the robes. For Scholar, the book is basically identical to the Summoner, just with the tassels ribbons here being teal instead of black. For Astrologian, this weapon is one of my favorites from the set. While the rotating pieces in the center are magically suspended, the golden piece at the top is suspended under tension from the red ribbons. This gives the impression that the entire frame is under strain like a strung bow, and that's what's keeping the magic contained within. The red feathers on the frame project outward like rays from a sun, matching the imagery of the sun on the disc at the center. This is suspended in the air between a pair of menacingly sharp and glossy talons, and the weapon as a whole just gives off this incredibly impressive vibe. For Sage, the overall shape and heavy use of scales like the handles of the other weapons make these look like a bunch of miniature battle stabs themselves. All four Nuoliths share the same model, but the outer two have additional feathers on opposing sides, and this makes them look very nice when sheathed. Moving on to the physical rangers, I wanted to come up with a set that was distinctly aiming based, and didn't share any armor models with my other roles. It took some time, but I eventually settled on the Facet Tabard, for a number of reasons despite it only having a single die channel. The gold accents were a close match, the red sash and crystals were similar to the ribbons and beads on the weapons, and I really liked the effect of the tattered and frayed cloth along the bottom. I used double dyeable gloves and boots to get the right golds and greens, and the headpiece to add some orange. Bard is my favorite Fizz range to play, so I predominantly modeled the outfit to match my idea of a hunter or ranger. One of my favorite details about this outfit is how the boots reach high enough to overlap the thigh straps on the expeditioner's pants, giving the look that these are garters or suspenders holding the boots up while still allowing freedom of movement. For Bard, I appreciate the decision to put the golden elements on the lower half of the bow. So many bow designs are very top-heavy, and this bow retains that balanced appearance while still being asymmetric in features. The arrow tip has this cool, jagged appearance, just like a stone arrowhead, and it matches the blades of the other weapons. For Dancer, these hefty quoits are held together with a plethora of straps and braids that hopefully you don't get your fingers caught in as you swing them around. I like that in order to keep your hand from sliding off the tapering scales, there's an additional wrapped spike on the inside to give you a full handle to grip on. For Machinist, I love the way the blade portion has been minimized and exists as a frame to support the barrel that's the main body of the weapon. More industrialized assembly methods have been used here, with visible rivets attaching the shaped metal trigger guard and a visually distinct revolver barrel. It even has one of those decorative gold hooks up top where an iron sight would be located. Lastly are the melee jobs, which I made glams for each of the armor types. I wanted the maiming set to make use of a heavier armored look without looking too much like a fending set, so I picked the ruthenium body to have a mostly cloth and chainmail vibe with a little bit of plating. The titanium gold gloves and boots allow the straps to be dyed separately, letting me replicate the straps on the weapons. Initially I tried dyeing the boots the same color as the gloves, but the red on the boots was just too bright and didn't really fit, so I went with a darker shade there, and it gives the boots this effect of being more faded and dirtier than the gloves. I also went with a darker green on the cloth to emphasize the scales on the weapon, making it visually distinct from the fending outfit that used lighter greens to emphasize the blades. For Dragoon, I was really pleased with the glaive style design, as I think the asymmetry works better here than trying to force a spear design with the same thematic elements. The long and simple shaft leaves most of the attention at the top of the weapon, and you can almost imagine this as being a single-handed sword attached to the end of the pole, fitting with that glaive or pole arm aesthetic. The feather tassel here also has a decent range of movement when changing positions. For Reaper, I love how they clearly went way over the top with this design and just added a little bit of everything to it. There's this massive stone blade swinging on a rotating wheel that is being held back from opening too far by some straps. There's wooden elements mixed in with gold and scales, a massive talon spike, and straps going everywhere. I personally feel like the blade is probably the weakest part of the design, as it's not really attached to the way any of the other weapons' blades are. But regardless, it's a really eye-catching weapon, and the plumage stands up nicely when sheathed. To make the striking set, I wanted emphasis on fabric materials that are common in monk and samurai gear, but still have some armored elements that fit the mixed materials design of the weapons. The centerpiece I settled on is the obsolete android's Cloak of Striking, because despite only having a single dye channel, the main chest piece is already in the perfect shade of gray by default, and even the gold trim along the bottom of the cloak matches the gold elements on the weapons. I then used the Crystarium gauntlets and greaves to add some armored pieces, making use of their recently added dual tie channels to get a great match in the green and gold. For Monk, I'll be honest, it's hard for me to judge these weapons because I prefer gauntlet or fist type weapons. However, I do think the split design of the blades is pretty unique and gives them the feeling of jaws or talons. The even balance of gray, red, gold, and green means that these weapons would be just as fitting in a more regal glam that emphasizes the reds and the golds, like my healer glam earlier. I think my favorite bit of detail on these are the little wing motifs in the center. These are the only weapons in the set that have these. For Samurai, again, the asymmetry of the design really works to the benefit of making this sword look rugged and weighty. I noticed when looking closely at the blade, the tip portion is actually wider than the base of the blade, giving it a subtle scimitar effect that helps to visually balance the heftiness of the hilt extension there along the back. I love the opposing hooks for the hilt guards, and the way the little one in particular hooks on the scabbard when sheathed is a nice touch. The scabbard in particular is something I often feel is the weakest part of samurai weapon designs, with it often getting all sorts of weird attachments or extensions that feel out of place. For this weapon in particular, I think the choice to keep the blade relatively clean and instead add the feathers and tassel bits to the scabbard works perfectly to give it an appropriate flair and make it a fitting part of the glam. And finally, my scouting set makes use of the Uraeus coat that comes with both a red sash and gold trim. I then added the Barconial pants because you can never have too many belts, and the buckles and holes were a perfect brass to match. I think the weakest part of the glam is the Pantheon gloves and boots because they have a lot of unavoidable silver color. I debated different options, but I needed those knee-height metallic boots that reached the short pant length without looking too heavily armored, and I didn't want to reuse one of my previous choices. I think the end result is subtle enough to not bother too much, and I get that badass, if not wildly unsafe, fingerless gauntlets look. For ninja, these weapons are aptly named cleavers for those massive butcher knife-looking blades. The size alone made these an instant favorite for me, as I've never really been big on the more traditional kind of stealthy ninja aesthetics, despite really enjoying the way this job plays. My favorite feature of these is the serrated teeth along the back. They look absolutely brutal, and you can just imagine the damage they would do. I love how the claw motifs at the end of the gold decorations look like a bird's talons reaching out to grasp. For Viper, I love the scimitar shape and balanced design. Viper weapon blades sometimes get a bit oversized near the hilts, which works okay in twin blade mode but looks really awkward to me in the separated dual blade mode. This weapon though looks perfectly viable as two one-handed swords, and the single-sided blade design fits that shoulder rest pose when unsheathed. The hilts have these spooky-looking stylized faces carved into them, which is pretty neat. At least they look like faces to me, with a nose, mouth, and eyes. I also like how the blade has a real chip out of it, rather than just implying one with the textures. Even sheathed, this weapon looks fantastic. With the shape of the hilts and the size of the blades, you could almost mistake these for being the scabbards themselves that would stay a part of the glam when you draw the swords. And that does it for the full set. Overall, I think these are one of, if not the best, extreme weapon sets that we've gotten, and I cannot wait for their glowy crafted versions. Valigarmanda's theme of multiple elements with fire, ice, and lightning instantly makes me think of similar effects on other extreme weapons, like Zervin's dual fire and ice orbs, and Susano's lightning effects. I want to see something like that all mixed together for the crafted weapons. Maybe have them shift between the different elemental colors in the same way that Omega and Mandible weapons do. But anyway, that's all for this video. Thank you so much for watching.